Don't take it, don't. Don't take it, don't. Don't take it, don't. Don't take it, don't.
Dale Borglum, who's the founder and executive director of the Living Dying Project, the first organization in the Western world to have as its mission cultivating conscious dying. And a core assumption of the Living Dying Project is that a life-threatening illness can be an opportunity for spiritual awakening. And in my experience, the Living Dying Project really is the gold standard in bringing transpersonal care to the dying. And I have to say that Dale and the Living Dying Project we've collaborated, the Hanuman Foundation's collaborated with the Living Dying Project on many innovative projects over the years. So it's my great pleasure to welcome my longtime and dear friend, Dale Borglum.
Well, as Toby mentioned, I'm the director of the Living Dying Project. StephenLevine and I, back in the late 70s, decided that the place in our society that consciousness had not penetrated was the encounter with life-threatening illness and with death. I've been doing this work for a very long time, and during this time, many of my clients are people with cancer who are on the spiritual path. I meet a rather strongly pre-selected subpopulation of people who have serious illness because we offer spiritual support. What is spiritual support, of course? Recently, I had a client who was a clinical psychologist, PhD psychologist. She had meditated more than just about any person I had ever talked to. And toward the end of her life, she had deeply gotten involved in devotional practices, going to all kinds of kirtan camps. And yet she said to me, my spiritual life has been a failure. I'm still afraid of dying, and I haven't been able to meditate well enough to make my illness go away. I bring her up because she is an extreme example. So many people who are on the spiritual path, meditators particularly, feel inadequate because their practice hasn't been strong enough to deal with the emotions that have been talked about here today. And what I have really come to over 45 plus years of doing this are 2 points that I'd really like to directly make. The first point is that for many people, mindfulness practice does not cut through the strength of the emotions that arise at the end of life, confronting loss of all your stuff, all your friends, your body, and your mind. That will happen to each of us at some point. Is your practice strong enough at that point to be mindful of what does this feel like? My first meditation teacher, Suzuki Roshi, said, the most important thing is finding the most important thing. And what I have found, I've done a lot of Vipassana practice myself, that a lot of these wonderful Eastern practices that you and I have been following were developed by and for people who did not have iPhones, who did not have automobiles, who were grounded and centered. They were walking around barefoot. And the piece in meditation practice that has really transformed my life, and I have to confess, I'm a recovering scientist. I have a PhD in mathematics, which did almost kill me in some kind of way. But the piece that really changed my practice and has changed the practice for a lot of my clients is embodiment, of getting grounded and centered. The Dalai Lama, on his third visit to America, said, now I'm beginning to understand, and it makes me very sad, you Americans don't like yourselves. So that it's usually assumed when we begin this big project of disidentifying with who we think we are and identifying with our true nature, that we like ourselves. But when we begin this process with this neurotic overlay of fear, guilt, and shame, it becomes very complicated and almost impossible to go into the heart deeply enough to allow us to go to the stage of Tantra, which is one of the main things I'd like to talk about today. Because that's, I think, where true healing happens. In America, in English, we say, I am afraid. In Spanish, it's yo tengo miedo, I have fear. In Tibetan, we say, fear is here. So just in the way we think about in language our relationship with emotion, it's often in the mind, it's conceptualized. How often have you really felt fear? Very often, almost always, for almost everybody, when fear arises, immediately we go to the trigger. We fixate on, I'm afraid of that, rather than what does it feel like right now for me to be in this body that is feeling fear? Many people come to the Living Dying Project because they want to die spiritually, or they want to help me be their meditation guide. And a lot of people come with this hope of, let's work with the fourth chakra, heart, compassion, devotion, fifth, sixth chakra, tantra. But almost everybody has come carrying a big bag of fear, guilt, and shame. Fear, the demon of the first chakra; guilt about what you're doing, the demon of the second chakra; shame, I'm ashamed of who I am, the demon of the third chakra; and grief then is the demon of opening the heart. So that to expect that when somebody has a very short amount of time to be able to go through talk therapy or to do a lot of vipassana and become mindful of all the patterns is often asking too much. But often people have a great deal of motivation. Short amount of time, big motivation. How can we really deal with that? How can we harness that motivation so that when your life is being supportive, it's a perfect day, you're at the beach, Bolinas, you're with somebody you love, the heart can stay open. But when it's a difficult day, when the doctor says, you've got cancer, or your father has died, or something has been lost, can we open our heart then? Until we have created a foundation of being in the lower chakras, it's going to be very difficult to be able to keep the heart open. I'd like to read a very short part of a poem by Rumi. In the poem, he's responding to a guy who said his prayers were never answered. He prayed and he prayed, God never responded. And God responded, the longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. So this woman who came to me, this psychologist, with all the meditation, all the devotional practice, was feeling that God would answer in either taking her illness away or taking her fear away, taking her inadequacy away, the fact that her practice wasn't strong enough to heal things. And in our conversations and me encouraging her to actually feel the inadequacy. What does it feel like in the body? What does it feel like to be afraid? Can you inhabit the root when you're afraid? Can you inhabit your lower belly? Can you get grounded and centered enough to feel your emotions now? Then there's a support for the vulnerability of the heart, for the spacious heart. Without this embodiment piece, most Westerners are overwhelmed in their meditation practice, in my experience, toward the end of life. We've talked today about psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And Tantra, quantum mechanics that Michael talked about earlier, Tantra, quantum mechanics, and psychedelics are all showing us the same thing. For many people, psychedelics is a quick view, but is it possible to open the heart enough, be spacious enough that we're able then to directly be living the tantric reality that even cancer, even approaching death, even the death of a loved one is something that is part of the sacred reality. It's beyond good and bad. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have this remarkable notion that compassion is a mixture of sadness and joy. We're sad because look around the room, look around the world. We're sad because the human condition, people are dying, climate change, political divisiveness, on and on. But is there a joy because our heart is so open, a joy that transcends happiness and sadness? So that by finding this grounding piece, this place of dropping into the belly, the martial art of being you, the martial art of somebody who's grieving, the martial art of somebody who is working with your own cancer, whatever it might happen to be, that then will support the open heart. And when the heart opens enough, let me even backtrack. So in Buddhism, there are three qualities, defining qualities of the open heart. The first one is the heart is spacious. There's no grasping. And when the heart opens enough, then we get that the ego is still there, but it's just one point in the vast sky of mind. It's not right in the face anymore. That we trust this spaciousness. And in that trust, whatever is arising can then be seen as a face of the divine, beyond pure and impure, beyond sacred and mundane. So that imagine saying a mantra. From the beginning stage of practice, mindfulness stage, Theravada Buddhism, we're invoking Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. We're saying it's safe to be present, it's safe to be in my body. I'm trusting what I'm actually physically feeling. But I'm not really feeling love yet. I'm not feeling connected. I'm invoking connection. I'm trusting that if I'm mindful enough that there is a natural movement toward wholeness. And when mindfulness deepens enough, when this embodied mindfulness deepens enough, we come to the point then where there is a connection. There is a relationship with the beloved as we're saying the prayer, as we're saying the mantra. But in Tantra, we're actually moment to moment creating the beloved. So that imagine saying, just as an example, saying Ram, please show up. As opposed to in the second stage, Ram, I'm in love with you and I feel your love for me. But when you say Ram, it's not a tool, it's not pointing at something. It is the full expression, and that you are and that I am and the cancer is. Cancer does not cause suffering. Resistance to cancer causes suffering. And until we're able to reach this stage of tantric understanding, where we could even talk about a quantum mechanics way of looking at emotions, they aren't solid. They're always changing. There's an entanglement. 3 guys just got a Nobel Prize in 2022 for quantum entanglement, which is essentially saying it's all one universe. There's only one song. And even beyond that, the Western worldview is that we are separate perceiving devices, perceiving an objective, separable reality. And what quantum mechanics and, in my experience, psychedelics and Tantra is saying is the opposite of that, that we're not perceiving an objective, separable reality, but that there is one reality, one consciousness flowing through us, moment to moment, creating experience. Now, that can sound kind of hypothetical, intellectual, but imagine living in that tantric reality. My guru, Neem Karoli Baba, the guy that Ram Dass was going around talking about all the time, he said, the best form to worship God is every form, not just Ram and Krishna and Shiva and Buddha and Christ, but you and me and the oncologist. He also said, I am always in communion with you. All the religions say that. Tantra is living that reality that moment to moment, the sacred nature of everything, not that it's all beautiful, not that it's all happy-making, but it's all real, that we can trust that sense of reality. One other quote. My papers are all over the place here. So Suzuki Roshi said to his students, you're all perfect, but there's still some room for improvement. It's a kind of a funny quote, but that is the essence of what we're talking about here. Can we be living two lives at the same time? Where there's this very human reality that our fathers die, we get cancer. I was reading an article in the New York Times a few days ago about immigration, and there was a doctor saying he got a letter from one of his patients who was an elderly Hispanic woman and said, doctor, could you please write me a letter telling the police if they arrest me to not handcuff me behind because of such bad pain in my shoulders that would be almost excruciating, to handcuff me in the front. Now, we can think about 100,000 people being afraid of being deported, but that one story of that one woman who was really, all she wanted to do was not be handcuffed in the back. Okay, so there's this human dimension. And at the same time, we're all perfect. I find that when I'm at the bedside of somebody who's dying, I can do one or the other pretty easily. I can be there with the story, the drama, the grief, the loss, and I can be there as the meditation teacher, the person who sees the perfection of all of it. But can I do both of those things at the same time? Can I be living that balance, that tantric balance, where I'm embodied, I'm in my lower chakras, I'm grounded, it's the martial art of me being at somebody's bedside, and it's all perfect. It's both of those at the same time. And until we can do that, there's work to do. So Tantra is not about renunciation. It's not about gradually transforming things. In the beginning of practice, we're focusing on the object. What does it feel like to be afraid? What does it feel like to be told that you have cancer? What is the object that I'm paying attention to? As practice deepens, we get to the Mahayana stage, the great vehicle. It's more about what is our relationship with what we're experiencing. But finally, at the tantric stage, it is what is the nature of experience itself? Moment to moment, is each experience a reflection of the Divine Mother? Is each experience a reflection of who we truly are? So it is my very, very firm belief, I won't tell you why particularly, I've had so many experiences though, that consciousness survives death. Something about each of us survives death. I'm sure many, many people in the room have had experiences of a departed loved one coming to you, or you being out of your body in certain kinds of way. And the Tibetans say that when you die, there will be a light as bright as 1,000 suns. That is a very, very bright light. And that light is so bright that very probably, unless we have practiced being with that light now, we will recoil a bit from it. A lot of spiritual practice is about working with what obstructs the light, but there's a parallel path. How much can you and I bear that light right now? that light that will be there as you're dying is here in this room right now, completely as much. It's just that it seems so clearly that I'm up on the stage and you're over there, and I'm got this amount of hair and you've got that amount of hair, and we have all these differences. And yes, that is true, but that distracts us from resting in that wholeness, resting in that light. To the extent we can do that now, dying will be another moment of resting in that light. When Gandhi was assassinated, when some stranger walked out of a crowd and pumped 3 bullets into his chest, as he was falling over, he was saying the name of God. He was saying Ram, Ram, Ram. And the only way he was able to do that was that he was doing that all the time. He didn't decide to do it, oh, I'm shot, now I'm going to start practicing, right? He was able to do that all along. So I would like to save some time for questions. Let's see if there are remarks or questions.
I'm interested in the comment if the consciousness survives, and how do you experience it? How do we think about it?
Right.
What does that feel like?
So from the standpoint of psychedelics, from the standpoint of near-death experiences, from the standpoint of quantum mechanics, I could give a whole discourse on how consciousness is not as solid as we think it is. My father came to me after he died. I've been around so many dying people, and very often I can feel them for a while. My experience, first of all, certainly is that somebody hovers around the body after they've died for a certain relatively short amount of time, and then at some moment, boom, they're gone from the room, and that body lying there doesn't seem to have too much to do with who that person was. But then even after that, there's many people have had, and I certainly have had, what I feel is a direct experience of spirit. And I'm not trying to sell anything here. I would guess that you probably have had that experience yourself in various ways. Somehow, to me, this whole endeavor that we're embarked on here, this human endeavor, if we're just alive one time and tiny babies are starving to death and Elon Musk gets to do what he gets to do and all the things that are going on in the world, it just seems that this is almost unbearably wrong and ironic and so many other things. And somehow it seems that everybody goes through everything. That I've been the abuser, I've been the abused, I've been the murderer and the murdered, I've been all of those things. Maybe there's more to come. In some sense, I'm not too concerned about what happens after I die. I'm a practical person. I want to know, what can I do now so that I can be more embodied, more physically here, so that I can trust the vulnerability of my heart, to then let me open into this tantric reality that everything is beyond good and bad, sacred and profane. And I guess my best answer is that I've had the great gift to be around some of the most wonderful masters of the late 20th century, who all the things they said about life seemed to be true. And what they said about consciousness was consciousness survives death. Differences depending on what cultural tradition they came from. But certainly, that's what they were saying. And just as an example, I grew up in the Bay Area. I was here in the 60s when consciousness was exploding. And I went to a lot of yogis, roshis, swamis, shaman, lamas, all these people were coming and going. And I developed a test question that I asked all of these men, some female, almost all men back in those days. And the question was, what would I say to a friend of mine who was approaching death? He'd never meditated, and he was really afraid. And what all the good ones said was pretty much something like, don't focus on his illness. Don't try to fix the illness. Don't try to even focus on him. Merge your mind with the one mind, and then merge your mind with the mind of your friend. Trust that there is this unity of consciousness. Go into that and then be with that other person. So that I can say all kinds of clever things. I've been doing this for 47, 48 years now. But it's really, what level of consciousness am I bringing to the bedside that's there in that moment, and that's going to be in the after-death state. And whether that's reincarnation or heaven and hell or Shirley MacLaine or who knows what it is, something's going to happen. But to me, the important thing is the way we live is going to go a long way in determining how we die. And the way we die is going to determine what happens next. So how can we live this moment right now? I mean, one of the motivating truths in Tibetan Buddhism is you're going to die, but you don't know when. Completely obvious intellectually. But if we really knew that we weren't necessarily going to get out of this room alive, today, now, how would it affect the way that we were willing to be with each other, to love each other, to be vulnerable with each other, to hold that truth that we're going to die, but we don't know when, that life is precious. So, to me, then, that extends to wanting to create a life and support other people to create lives where they're more comfortable resting in boundless spaciousness, because that's what we're going to die into. To the extent that we're afraid of space, we're afraid of total vulnerability, that's going to be there when you're dying. When you are dying, Donald Trump will be smiling at you, leaning over your bed. And what I mean by that is that any place in you that automatically reacts to that is going to be there in your psyche, in your unconscious mind. So we might as well deal with it now. Okay.
I just want to say thank you for pointing out to stay with the shame, to stay with, what were the lower chakra? Grief?
First chakra, root chakra, fear. Learned from second trimester to about 1 year old. Second chakra develops. First chakra is about being physical. Second chakra, moving into the world, feeling guilty about what you do. Third chakra, shame about who you are.
And so the gift for me is your encouragement to us to stay with that, not with the object of it. Is that?
So that one of the core teachings in Tantra is to touch and be touched by what you're experiencing. There is a tendency in spiritual life to try to let go of something before we've really touched it. To allow ourselves to be touched by the grief, be touched by the fear, be touched by the guilt, by the shame, whatever it is.
I think we've probably all experienced like magic before, like that, whether it's moments or hours or days or weeks or even a month or two where you've just, you're living in the flow, like you're getting it all. You're receiving people. If I could hold on to this.
Right.
This day, this magic, this week, this magic, like,
Right.
And it's like, I don't want to lose that magical experience, this thing that I'm in tune with. And eventually life gets on and, there you are, like getting pissed off or whatever, having a bad day. Okay. Do you have a secret for us you want to share?
I do have a secret.
Thank you.
Somebody asked Krishnamurti, how do you stay so calm all how do you stay so calm all the time? He said, I don't care what happens. Okay, but a slightly more nuanced answer is that to the extent we're grasping at I want to stay in the flow, we're squeezing the life out of it, we're pushing it away. Just as it's hard to deal with fear, guilt, and shame, it's also difficult not to get lost in the pleasant stuff. So is it possible, as I was saying, the movement from I'm aware of the content to I'm aware of my relationship with the content, but finally the nature of the content, whether it's flow or not flow, cancer or not cancer, grief or not grief, at the core of each cell in our body is this conscious radiance at each experience. So that when the body-mind gets stabilized enough, the heart gets vast enough, then we can rest in the nature of things rather than being buffeted about by, am I in the flow? Is it good? Is it bad? It's not about being happy. It's about being real. What is real right now?
We have a question from the virtual audience.
Yeah.
This person says, Jeremy Taylor, the dream worker, told me that it was his deep intuition that if we can become comfortable with the unusualness of the dream world, it will be of immense value as we die. Your thoughts on this, Dale?
Okay. Well, certainly in Tibetan Buddhism, they feel that lucid dreaming is excellent preparation for dying. That to the extent we can be awake when we're asleep and having a dream, it enables us to be awake when we're having this dream of us being separate people in this room, right? So that this, from the standpoint, without diving into quantum mechanics too deeply here, this is a dream too, right? And all spiritual work is about being awake in this moment. Certainly learning to do it while we're asleep. Try going to sleep consciously tonight. I was at a meditation retreat once, and the monk said during the interview with me, he said, last night did you go to sleep on an in-breath or an out-breath? And I thought to myself, I'm at the wrong retreat here. I have no idea what... But the secret is you always go to sleep on an out-breath of letting go. And you probably die on an out-breath. You breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in, you breathe out, you don't breathe in again. And just one final teeny point, pay attention right now to the point at the very, very end of the out-breath. You breathe in, you breathe out, and right before the space between the in-breath and the out-breath, there's the complete letting go. There's nobody there. That very simple, tiny moment at the very end of the out-breath. Pay attention to that if you like. There's a lot to learn there, I think. Thank you so very much.
Don't take it, 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 don't take it,